What's going on, FA Nation? Welcome back. This is the Fantasy Alarm NASCAR DFS podcast. I am Dan Malin, and I am joined, as always, by our FSWA three-time NASCAR Writer of the Year, Matt Selz. Matt, the playoff field is locked in. We are coming off a pretty exciting Darlington race, and we live in a world where Daniel Suarez, Chase Briscoe, Harrison Burton, and Austin Cindric are all playoff drivers in the same year. It's a fantastic time to be alive.
It is. Congrats to Chase Briscoe. That was one heck of a drive at Darlington last week. Started third, basically held the top five spot all night, and then made an unbelievable pass for the win.
Yeah.
Slingshotted past three cars and then held off Kyle Busch for the last, I don't know, 21 laps, basically? Something like
Yeah,
that.
Kyle Busch on fresh tires too. Like I think he
Yeah.
restarted 12th and quickly moved up to second, but just could not get around Briscoe.
Yeah, it was impressive, and props to NBC for the coverage of like the last 10 laps, 11 laps of that race, where they did a split screen where one view was Kyle Busch's bumper, looking out at Briscoe, and then the other was looking in the car at Kyle Busch, so you could see his intensity and like where his hands were going and where he's trying to steer the car. It was masterful coverage. Really, really uh, gave the moment the intensity it needed, because there was like, sure, there was passing happening elsewhere, but
Yeah. All
nothing
that
else
mattered
mattered
was
because
that because they were racing for the playoff spot.
right, exactly, because if Kyle Busch had won, he'd have made the playoffs. If Chase Briscoe wins, which he did, he makes the playoffs. Um, so just fantastic. Again, great coverage at Darlington, making it feel like it was the most important sporting event on that night. Which,
Yeah.
it's a crown jewel event. It's the Southern 500, but there was an air about it that I feel like has been missing for a little bit. So, um, just great. I do look. They interviewed both Chris Buescher and Bubba Wallace after the race, the two guys closest to making the playoffs who didn't make it, and I thought that Bubba Wallace handled the interview far better than Chris Buescher did.
I
Um,
missed that, so you might have to elaborate.
so Bubba was very honest about it, didn't make excuses, says, look, we got to be better. We were closer. Um, we were close several times this season. We had to make it pay. It wasn't just about tonight in Darlington. It wasn't just about last week at Daytona. There were chances throughout the season. I got to be better. Look, one of our cars won the regular season title and the other one didn't make the playoffs. That's on me. We'll get better. We'll improve.
Yeah.
Chris Buescher was like, well, I'm pretty frustrated. We had some shots. We didn't ultimately play the game the right way. The point system kind of didn't help us. And it's like, what? Like, it's been the point system all year. You knew what you had to do. I can understand being frustrated. You had what looked like a Darlington win locked up earlier in the year before Tyler
Was that
Reddick.
when Reddick took them both out? Yeah.
Yeah, that was when Reddick took him out, and then Busher had the famous "You have one of those and I don't" when he was pointing to the win sticker on the car. Um, and then there was like 3 or 4 weeks in a row where Busher was really close, and then just kept getting taken out or bad luck or whatever.
Hmm.
But to sit there and blame the point system, sure. Can you be upset that a guy outside the top 30 made the playoffs? Yes. We have talked about that ad nauseum on this pod. I
Yeah.
don't think it's a good addition. I think you got to be at least top 25 to make the playoffs.
Hmm.
Certainly shouldn't be the last place driver on points. Congrats again to Harrison Burton getting a second place. Great. But you shouldn't be able to be the last place guy. Like, you should not be the Chicago White Sox and make a wild card berth. That shouldn't that shouldn't be the case. So I can understand if that's where he was going. But to sit there and say we didn't play the point game the right way over 26 races, what do you mean? Like, your other car got tons of stage points. Your other car got a win. your other car was consistently running better than you. So, like, just own it, man.
Yeah. All right, but we do get the playoffs underway this weekend. Heading to my backyard, Atlanta Motor Speedway. I will not be attending the races. Just too much going on this weekend. College football, start of NFL, just a ton of things going on. But overall, kind of mixed feelings on NASCAR going with Atlanta in the first round of the playoffs, and then Talladega in round two. Seems a little baffling to have two drafting tracks in the playoffs. Like we only have 10 races left in the season, and to have
Right.
two drafting tracks in the playoffs, it just seems a little odd.
Yeah. We all consider these wild cards. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
it is a skill to be good at plate tracks, but just ask Joey Logano and Brad Keselowski how well that's worked for them in the last, 5, 6, 7 plate tracks.
Oh, I
Hasn't,
didn't even
just
realize I'm
ask.
wearing my Daniel Suarez hoodie.
Yeah, just ask Martin Truex, who hates these ones with a passion. I can never figure them out, right? Um, it does seem a little bit more up to chance than I think we would all probably like to see. Yes, they have to be raced at some point, but like you're racing Michigan once a year. Why can't you put Michigan early in the playoffs? So you're not going to Michigan when it's like 40 degrees outside, right? It'll still be decent if it's in the first round, and then you can stick
Yeah.
another. Like the Atlanta race was in July last year. The second Atlanta race was in July. Why is it getting a 3-month bump?
Yeah, that I don't get either. And I think NASCAR kind of realized the error of their ways because I believe for 2025, they are moving the second Atlanta race back to July or June.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's earlier in the season. Um Homestead is out of the playoffs though for the playoffs next year. It's like back to like March, which is really frustrating. They keep moving that thing way around and it's real annoying. Um
It's the best track.
so I mean, look, Atlanta put on an unbelievable show earlier this year. An unbelievable show. The first Atlanta race is in the running for race of the year.
Yeah.
Um, are we gonna get that again? God, I hope so, because that would be
It was awesome. It
amazing.
was a lot of fun.
Was this the 3 wide? I think this was the 3
This
wide
was the
finish.
three wide that at the time was the closest race or the closest finish in NASCAR history. And then a couple months later, Kansas topped it between Buscher and Larson.
Right. Right, yes. Kansas
Um,
was the one, the 3 wide that followed the horse race, and then, there was all the NASCAR did horses. Congratulations.
yeah.
Um, so first things first, what are they calling for in terms of weather this weekend down in your neck of the woods?
Friday's supposed to be a little rainy, but it's also Atlanta in the summer. August and September are typically the most brutal months down here in terms of heat. Also, but this year it really hasn't been too bad. It was actually mostly June and July that felt worse. For Friday, it does feel like there's a little bit of rain in the schedule. Saturday and Sunday there could be some pop ups, but there's nothing on the schedule for Friday since they don't have practice. So if it holds true, Saturday and Sunday should be pretty good. It's going to be hot at the track. It always is. But when I checked this morning, it just seemed like Friday was the only day this weekend where there were potentially any big issues of anything that could be impacted. But there's nothing scheduled on Friday for NASCAR,
Yeah, well, that's a change.
so we are in
Both
pretty
in
good shape
both
for the
in
race.
both in weather and nothing on track for Friday. Yes, remember there is no practice this week. It's ostensibly a plate track, and teams don't like to practice on plate tracks because they don't want to damage a car when practice doesn't matter. Cup qualifying will happen Saturday, I think early afternoon. And then the race for Cup is Sunday afternoon. So,
Up against
generally,
the NFL. Best of luck.
yeah. And a home Falcons game to boot.
Yeah.
So that's great. That's a good call there in NASCAR. Although they are starting it a couple hours after the 1 o'clock games kick off, so maybe people switch from blowouts to NASCAR, but unlikely.
Yeah.
So in terms of strategy for this week, because it's going to be a little different than what we saw at Daytona a couple of weeks ago, because you can actually have a lap sled leader at Atlanta.
Mhm.
Why? It's a 1.5-mile track with a 400-mile race. So there's like 260 or so laps in this race. That means there's a chance to have a decent amount of laps led from a guy. Even though it's a plate track, they're clicking off laps way faster than they do at Daytona or Talladega. You also tend to see more single file in this race so that people make it to the end, and single file is good for laps led leaders. Now, I will say that the race earlier this year, they were fairly well split up.
Oh yeah.
In terms of laps led, the most we had was actually Todd Gilliland leading 58 laps in the race, and then the next closest, I believe, was Austin Cindric at 32, Blaney at 31, and you had a couple of guys at 27 and 28. So,
Yes, 6 drivers led 25 plus laps. If we extend that to 15 plus laps, it's 8 drivers.
yeah, so it was pretty spread out earlier this year. Now, it was the second race of the year.
Mhm.
And we can tell that because both Austin Cindric and Todd Gilliland led a bunch of laps, and they haven't since. This race in the fall, sorry, not the fall, the July race last year, the second race at Atlanta last year was rain shortened at 185 laps, and again didn't have a ton of like what we would call lap sled dominators. I mean, Eric Almirola led the most at 46, and then Buescher at 39, and then a few guys at 19 and 20. So, you know, the last few races haven't seen a lap sled dominator. The one that kicked things off in March of 2023, though, did see Joey Logano win and lead 140 of 260 laps.
Yeah.
And Keselowski led 47 in that one for the two big chunks there.
It does seem like because the first 3 races here, and you're basically touching on it. It's the first 3 races here had pretty much one primary dominator. Because when Byron won here in the very first race, he led 111 laps. Chase Elliott then led 96 when he won. And there are still other drivers that are getting between about 20 and 40 laps led.
Yeah, Byron had 41 in the one that Chase won.
Yeah. But it does seem like I don't even remember the race from a year ago that was shortened, but the race from the spring that had one of the best finishes where the racing was great. It is a little more fun when the field is kind of splitting up these laps led.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, Suarez won the race and led 9 laps.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's something we can look at here. Obviously, it's possible to see guys lead 50-something laps at Daytona. It's a little less common. But with the 260 scheduled laps, it's more likely to happen here. Also because they tend to go more single file.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that this being the first playoff race, that guys are going to be kind of tentative to really
They
start.
know that you need to just make it to the end.
Right. Like stage 3 might get a little nuts.
Oh, for sure.
But the first 2 stages, I think, are going to be fairly tame. So if you tune in and you're like, oh my God, all my guys are still on the track and we're through stage 2 and there's a bunch of guys on the lead lap and nobody's really had an issue, it's because it's the first race in the playoffs and nobody really wants to start anything. And
Mm-hmm.
the non-playoff guys don't want to get in trouble with the playoff guys, and other playoff guys don't want to start stuff in the first race of the playoffs knowing that there's payback coming. So it's going to be a little bit more tame. So that's another reason why I think we may see one guy lead a good chunk of laps here and a second guy lead, another decent chunk. So with that being said, it is still a plate race. So we don't want to go pure stack the back.
Correct.
But we do want to get a little bit of everybody because variance is your friend at Atlanta here. But with that, do we want to start going through the driver pool, which I accidentally shared at the beginning of the pod because I didn't think it was going to kick onto the screen as
No, you're good. Yeah,
shared it.
let's just dig in.
All right, so we're gonna go once again. We're looking at the DraftKings player pool here. Another thing, the tournaments, the money pools on DraftKings and FanDuel tournaments has vastly shrunk
I haven't even looked.
because everything goes to NFL. Like I'm pretty sure the one I'm showing is the biggest prize to first. That's 50K, which is pretty decent. But like
Yeah.
last week, it was still 100K. It's been 100K basically all season. It was a milli maker for Daytona to start the year. So that's about the best you're going to find. So if you really want big paydays, these are the ones you're looking at. You're also, by the way, going to be playing up against more sharps now because all of the casual players went to NFL. So it's going to be a little harder to build lineups and really get to the top of the leaderboards at this point in the season.
All right, top of the board, Ryan Blaney. Can't say we're too surprised. On it, actually, the top three drivers were all teammates at one time.
They were. They are no longer, but they were
Yeah.
at one time very good at wrecking each other at these.
Ryan Blaney, Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano. All three are Fords. Blaney and Logano are the remaining Penske drivers. Brad, obviously, now with RFK. But still, same manufacturer. They probably still work together in the draft to move up. They will likely pit together as well.
Yep.
Really don't have any complaints about these three. Even Hamlin.
Yeah, I don't either. If we look back at the last 16 plate races, so we're looking at the last handful of Atlanta ones since they redid it. Basically all of Atlanta, Daytona, and Talladega since 2022, right?
Mm-hmm.
That amounts to 16 races. In that time, Ryan Blaney is tied for the most top 10s with 9 in those 16 races. He has the most top 5s at 6 and the best average finish at 12.4. That's right. The best average finish, folks,
it's outside the top 10.
Is outside the top 12. That's unusual, but that also tells you the chaos that happens at these races. So, I guess I would lean Blaney because he's had the most success recently at these style of tracks.
Yeah.
And the price difference isn't that much to make me really get off of either one. I'd probably then take Keselowski above Logano for the same reason. Keselowski's been more consistent of late, but again, we're splitting hairs here. And they're the most expensive for a reason. In terms of value this week, I think it's hard to judge value at a plate track. You're basically hoping to have the most guys finishing and at least everybody putting up 40 points.
Probably. That's what I would almost aim for. And I guess we kind of take the same approach where you can probably be a little okay leaving money on the table. You don't need to spend every dollar of the budget. Yes, we are giving a little more emphasis to the Dominator points this week because we've seen guys go out and, just this last spring, we saw a lot of guys lead. We saw 5 or 6 drivers lead 25 laps. I don't think we're going to see one solo Dominator. Again, I think it probably trends more to how last year's race was going in the spring. But yeah, value is a little hard to gauge, but I think setting yourself up with trying to find 6 drivers that can get 40 points, having that lineup, I guess, makes sense in your head, because it almost has to tell a story. It's like an it's like a DFS showdown lineup of sorts.
Right.
But yeah, 40 points is probably a good floor to set.
So,
which is odd because that's only even if each driver gets 40 points, that's still only 240 points. But minimum 40 points for each driver is ideal, and you need to get like dominator points and the win as well.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an idea, again, this is averages, but if you look over the last 16 plate races and we take out guys who are not in the field or have only done like single race, so basically we're taking out David Reagan, Josh Bilicki, and Anthony Alfredo, which I don't think is going to insult anybody. Corey LaJoy actually averages the most DraftKings points
Yeah,
in the last 16.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
And
one
it's
year once.
Yeah, and it's 41 points is what he's averaging over the last. And then Allmendinger is second at 40.2, and then Kyle Busch at 39.9. So there's only really 3 guys who are averaging 40 points. So doesn't mean that they're not all capable of going above that, because averages, obviously, some are above and some are below, but still, that's a pretty reasonable hope. So you're not really going to hear us talk a lot about 5x or 6x value this week, because it's like a road course. It's a tough thing to put a finger on.
A bit, yeah.
Look, Denny Hamlin's in play. We just talked about him.
Mm-hmm.
I typically don't like Kyle Larson at plate races.
No, I mean, it's well documented.
Yeah, I mean, he runs well, but then does not necessarily finish well. His average, let's put it this way, his average run position is 15.7 over the last 16 plate races. His average finish is 23.8.
Yeah.
So, and his average start is 8.8. So he spends most of the time kind of hanging out towards the front and then getting caught in the. It doesn't mean don't play him. Again, if you're playing multiple lineups this week, sprinkle a little bit of everybody in, because you never know what's going to hit and what's not going to hit. And, who saw Harrison Burton winning at Daytona a couple of weeks ago? Who saw Chase Briscoe winning? But he would probably be third or fourth in my Hendrick picks.
I think that you can probably make a much stronger argument for the other 3 Hendrick drivers. Like Elliott and Byron have both won here before. Byron, I think, has won twice. Bowman, it does seem like this year, particularly with drafting tracks, we have talked about Bowman a good amount for a previous podcast. So it does seem like he would be ranked towards the bottom. And there's fun little rumor going around. Yeah, go ahead.
There's rumors going around that he may be out at Hendrick. I don't know his contract status. He claims that he would know by now if he was out, because it's September and that's late in the year. But
yeah,
we've seen guys find out later than this. And the rumor is that he's going to the 7 to replace Corey LaJoy, which is interesting, because like a few years ago, it was rumored that LaJoy would be going to Hendrick to get basically his chair. So
the rumor is that Bowman would go to Spire
to take the 7 from LaJoy, who they've already announced is not
right
in their plans.
But and then what? Justin Haley to the 48?
Yeah, I don't know, because Justin Haley doesn't he have a long, like a couple year deal with Rick Ware?
I imagine you find ways out of it if the 48 comes calling.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some interesting rumors, but from doing this long enough, I tend to find out that when there's rumors started in NASCAR silly season, they more than likely wind up to be the case.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, I think Bowman is a good enough guy, but I don't think he's produced what needs to be produced in the Hendrick. I mean, the other 3 are clearly lapping him and have been for a while.
Yep.
So maybe there's extra pressure on Bowman to show up and do a little bit more than he's capable of.
Yeah.
So,
it would be awfully hard for Hendrick to move on from him if he somehow won this race and had 2 wins in one season.
Right. I mean, he is in the playoffs. It's not like
the
playoffs. He is in the playoffs. He is one of the lowest point totaled guys who won their way in. But if he wins this race and makes it to the next round and guarantees himself a top 12 finish, kind of hard to move on.
Talladega in the next round
from that guy. I will say there's zero reason not to play Kyle Busch this week.
Zero. Oh, so there's plenty of reason to play Kyle Busch.
Yeah, I said there's zero reason not to.
Yeah, I'm like trying to figure out the double negative.
Yeah, the double negative 3 a little bit. Probably could have worded that a little better.
It's okay. No, I actually agree. He almost won. I mean, he has been on a nice little tear ever since
He
they
almost
made
won
that-
at Daytona.
Almost won at Daytona. Almost won at Darlington. He was top 5. He was 4th at Michigan. Something happened over the Olympic break when
Yeah, they fired their engineer and got a new one.
Yeah, and mind you, when we came back and had Richmond, Austin Dillon was very competitive. Sure, he wrecked 2 guys to get the win and had his playoff.
But he was if that wreck hadn't happened from Stenhouse, he wins and he's in the playoffs.
Sure, yeah.
Like if that wreck happens 1 lap later and Austin Dillon's already taken the white flag, he's in the playoffs because it ends with a yellow. So yeah, they've been very good. Kyle Busch is not in the playoffs, but he's still hunting to keep that win streak alive.
Yeah.
He's won a race for 19 straight seasons in the Cup Series. That price is really quite tasty there at 88.
And he was one of the 3 drivers in contention to win here in February too.
True. And by the way, the guy that Ryan Blaney is tied with for the most top 10s in the last 16 plate races, Kyle Busch. The other guy who he just edges out in average finish, Kyle Busch, 12.7 to Blaney's 12.4.
DraftKings won't let me select Kyle Busch 6 times.
They're a little stickler.
It's awfully rude.
Yeah. So Kyle Busch, just fine. Slot him in there. Yeah. Don't care where he's starting. He should be a factor for the win. And that's the other thing. If you are new to NASCAR, DFS is your first year playing it. Playoffs are a little different because everybody's still on the track. A non-playoff driver can win a playoff race. It doesn't it counts as a win for them and their paycheck and their stats.
It's happened a lot more in the Next Gen series.
Yeah, last year didn't we go like 4 playoff races before a playoff driver won a race?
Probably. That sounds about right.
I don't think they won them in the first round for sure. So it can happen. It doesn't do it it doesn't lock if Kyle Busch was to win this, it wouldn't lock him into the next round. He's not in the playoffs.
Yeah.
It counts as a win for him. He gets the credit for it, paycheck, all that good stuff. All of the other playoff drivers just get the points they accumulated.
Ross Chastain won the race last year in Phoenix, and he wasn't even in the championship 4.
That's true. He did. Ryan Blaney won it.
Blaney was pissed at him.
Which is the first time a non-playoff driver has won the championship race since they've gone to this playoff format. What are you doing with Tyler Reddick this week?
Well, I'm hoping he's feeling better for starters.
Yeah, the flu race for him last week for sure. He definitely looked like death when he got out of that car, though.
Yeah, he didn't look good, and that was a shame because I opted to fade Kyle Larson for Tyler Reddick.
Yeah,
that went poorly.
Yes, it did. I mean, he still pulled off a 10th place, which won him the thing by a point.
Yeah.
Which, interestingly enough, they did point out that Kyle Larson spotted him a race because he never raced in the Coke 600.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I'm probably still okay with Reddick. He did win Talladega earlier this year.
Yeah, he's either going to finish in the top 10, top 5.
Yeah.
Or he's going to finish like 20th or worse. So, I mean, I'm sure we can say that about a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't know. And this is bad, programming or whatever, but it's just I'm just lukewarm on the guy. I don't have like a good obviously we have much stronger feelings and convictions with Kyle Busch.
Correct.
But Reddick, it's just kind of yeah, whatever. I can play that.
Yeah. I would agree. I mean, again, it's a plate race. We're going to get a little bit of everybody. We're playing multiple lineups, but if you're only playing a couple, Tyler Reddick could be a guy you just don't play because there's some other.
Yeah, because the other thing is too is like this, $7K and low $8K range is looking pretty good as well.
Correct.
Yeah. I feel like Austin Cindric is just going for it in this race.
I do too. I'm pretty intrigued by 3 of the 4 guys between, the only guy between 7,900 and 7,400. I don't necessarily like this week is Michael McDowell, only because he's. I mean, I know he's won plate races before, and
I think
decent,
that
but I think Bubba and Suarez and Cindric are gonna show up with something to prove this week.
I think the thing with McDowell in front row currently is that since he announced that he was leaving the team next year,
Correct.
they've just pivoted and put all their resources into Todd Gilliland's ride.
Who they did sign to an extension.
Yes.
So,
so yeah, for that reason, I'm kind of with you on not being too excited about Michael McDowell right now.
Yeah. Also, Suarez has done really, really well here in 3 of the last 4 races. He won this race earlier this year, finished second last year in the fall, or the July race.
Summer.
And then finished 6th in the second race here in 2022.
Yeah.
So that's pretty impressive. And then Cindric, look, it's Penske. He's in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
What better way to overachieve than get a win at a plate track, which, by the way, he's gotten wins at plate tracks. So, also, what a run that would be if we get Harrison Burton, Chase Briscoe, and Austin Cindric to win 3 in a row.
That'd be absolutely wild.
That'd be an unbelievable run. So, going further on down here, I don't have strong feelings about Ty Gibbs.
Well,
I mean, unless you do, you can change my mind.
No, not really. But I mean, I like that he was top 5 at Daytona just a few weeks ago, and this was a driver that we were getting for $2,000 more a few months ago, and maybe he's just a little burnt out on the season. It is a long and grueling schedule, and he's in his second full-time season. I thought he was going to have a win by now. Obviously, it has not been the case. He looked
did
great.
Finish second here earlier, 10th here in the second race of the year.
Yeah, so you are getting a playoff driver in Joe Gibbs Racing Equipment at 7,300. Sure, it is a drafting track, and it's probably not. Obviously, there's more appeal to play Cindric, who is won in Daytona and is just on a better drafting team per se.
Yeah.
So I kind of get it, but at the same time, I don't want to write Gibbs off because I do like the upside. I love the driver pedigree overall. Good price tag if I'm getting all that.
Yeah. The other thing working against him is, I don't know. I like the price tag on Bowman, Jones, Gilliland, Stenhouse, Austin Dillon, heck, even Graxon. Save a little bit, and if we do have to look for a higher price guy because either they're starting further back in the field than we expect, or we think they can get those extra laps led, then I'd rather save a little bit and get basically the same upside. So, but yeah, it's been a little while since here, Mr. Corey LaJoy. But you're certainly in play this week because it's a plate race.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what I wrote up because he did make my Fantrax preview article. Some notes I had was that LaJoy has gained 9 spots of position differential in 4 of the 5 races at Atlanta since the reconfiguration in 2022. Tends to gain more PD than Healy just because he qualifies much worse than Healy. But back in February, started P32 and finished 13th. Spring of 2023, started P31, finished 4th. Spring of 2022, started P33, finished 5th. So it's like, you almost won this race 2 years ago. So this is a race on the schedule that he has circled, and maybe this is his Harrison Burton moment.
Yeah, I mean, he's still looking for a job.
So is Harrison Burton.
Yes, he is. Yeah, the only real blemish in plate tracks for LaJoy was the Coke Zero Sugar 400, where he finished 34th, but he was running better than that and then got caught up in a wreck just like everybody else.
Amidst all the great racing, at the end of last week's Darlington race, I completely missed that Corey LaJoie got a top 10 at Darlington.
He did. That was pretty
For
impressive.
him. Do you even think he's good enough to get an Xfinity ride next year?
I don't know. He may have to pull it to Benedetto and go back to the Truck Series.
Yeah, probably.
Although that was more so because his attitude was terrible. At least LaJoie's got a good attitude.
Yeah, nice guy too.
Yeah. Also, there was that little tidbit we said earlier that LaJoie is the highest average scorer on DraftKings in the last 16 plate races, among those who are actually in the field this week. So yeah, I mean, look, any of these guys towards the bottom are in play this week. These are one of those weeks where literally you could play anybody, and I could tell you fine because I have no idea what's going to happen. Just because they look good at other plate tracks, just because they run historically well, doesn't mean that they're going to do that this week and vice versa, right?
I am 100% going all in on Cody Ware.
I mean, you see that. I was just highlighting in the 10 plate races he's run.
This is my Parker Retzlaff for this week.
His average start is 33.6. His average finish is inside the top 20.
Yeah.
So
do you think that Parker Retzlaff was not asked to come back because Chevy was worried he would once again push the wrong driver to a win?
I don't know. I do have to say I got to give credit to Kyle Busch for that one because there's all that talk about how he didn't choose to push the Chevy and he was pushing the wrong guy. And Kyle Busch is like, well, we have these pre-race team meetings where like every Chevy driver is in there, and Parker wasn't in there. So how can he be expected to do something when he's in the meeting when he's not in the meeting? And I was like, you know what? Props to Kyle Busch.
Yeah, because he could have thrown a very young and inexperienced driver under the bus.
Right. He also, by the way, Kyle Busch's radio was also calling for Christopher Bell to push him and not a Chevy driver. So there's that too. But
yeah,
I did see that Retzlaff had issues, conveniently enough, in the race this past weekend. That didn't seem to be above board.
Oh, Darlington. Yeah. If it's not a short flat track or a super speedway or a drafting race, I'm really not interested in playing Parker Retzlaff.
Yeah.
So I can't say I'm too surprised. But he did make the Xfinity playbook for this week's race.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't invite him back because he didn't push a Chevy, but that's a little petty and stupid. And
he's young; he'll figure it out.
And yeah, again, Kyle Busch sticking like, you want the guy to push me? Invite him to the meeting, please. Yeah. One guy down here I have very little interest in is Shane Van Gisbergen. If it's a road course, sure, but he's also $5,000 more if it's a road course.
See, he actually did make my Xfinity playbook, which will be published Friday morning. And I fully acknowledge, I didn't even, in my article, I kind of said, this is just an Xfinity Series play. Do not play him for the Cup Series race because I have less confidence in him in that field against that competition, and especially this craptastic Kaulig racing equipment.
Although he did lead 3 laps at Talladega.
Did he? No, good.
He finished 28th, but he
finished 28th. Yeah, and overall, his best finish this year in the Cup Series is 21st. Now, granted, he probably could have won at Chicago, but just had the untimely wreck that ultimately ended the day, and that was like a huge chalk bomb that blew up. But
yeah,
I agree. For the Cup race, zero interest. For the Xfinity Series race, I do have some interest. I think he's actually getting a lot more comfortable on the ovals in the Xfinity Series.
Yeah, I mean, he's got really no choice. That's the only place he has to get comfortable because
that's the other thing too. And the organization and the team has said, we don't really want him racing too many Cup Series races on road courses. We know he's good there. If anything, we want to get a practice on the ovals. So, anytime they go to a road course or whatever for Xfinity, he's a contender to potentially go on and move on to the next round. But the ovals is where he needs to work. And unfortunately, this week I'm just not on board. I'm with you in just not liking him as a DFS play.
Yeah. And Carson Hocevar, on the other hand, has finished top 20 in 3 of the 4 plate races this year. Only one he didn't was Daytona 500.
That's interesting. I wasn't
He
aware
finished
of that.
19th here in the spring. He finished 17th at Dega. He
Yeah.
finished 11th at Daytona 2 weeks ago.
And he qualifies poorly. That's all
He
we care
does.
about.
He does. So, those are some guys we can play this week. I'll have a playbook out Saturday. At some point, qualifying doesn't really matter. So, we'll see. My daughter has a soccer game in the middle of the day, so we'll see how that breaks up stuff. But yeah, we'll have that, and then projections will be out Sunday morning. So look for those. Rostership will be out Sunday morning. Look for those. I know it's a busy morning with NFL getting going. And then, yeah, I mean, if you have any questions in Discord, you can ask them. I'm probably going to tell you your lineup is okay.
Yep.
Unless there's a couple of the
Unless you're
guys.
starting the drivers in the first 3 rows.
Right. Don't start a bunch of dudes in the top 10 because it's not like a normal intermediate by any means. You can start maybe 2 of them. But, other than that, like, let's see. Earlier this year, yeah, I mean, less than half, about half the top 10 was guys who started in the top 8. So that should tell you what you need to know. Maybe start a couple, but it's pretty high risk to do that. I would stick with probably just one there, like a standard plate build. But yeah, we'll have the normal stuff in the playbook aside from the practice to qualifying table because there's no practice. Betting piece will be out Friday, and Dan will have you covered with the other series.
Cool. Yep. Xfinity Playbook goes live Friday morning. We'll have updates Saturday with the driver pool once we know the starting order. But Matt, as always, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck to you this weekend with Atlanta Motor Speedway, and best of luck to the FA Nation.
Best of luck, FA Nation.